Okay. Anyways, so as usual, we're gonna take a moment, turn in. Um, Tonight, I would like to discuss the idea of expectations and how we work with expectations. How do we let them become a part of our practice? Because again, remember in a traditional meditation practice and a sangha, any meditation center that you go to, the whole idea is it boils down to how can we lessen the amount of suffering in this world internally in our emotions and our mind so we can relax into the present moment, into what is, and be here because the present moment is all we have to work with, right? And so expectations tend to get into the way of that. um, I'm coming fresh off of that experience all over again, and it's kind of a rinse and repeat kind of experience. I think we all notice our expectations more. I know I do. When there's the sting of disappointment, that's kind of when I realize my expectations kind of got the best of me. And so, going to discuss about that tonight, and then we're going to sit. And if y'all have any questions or things afterwards, we'll do that, and we'll be wrapped up in about an hour or so. Um, so let's see how it goes. So clear your lap and just take a moment, close the eyes, and just arrive. Notice how the breathing feels. How does it naturally adjust your body? Maybe the inhales lift that chin up a bit. How is it in there for you? What's going on? Just check it out. Go into it with more of an investigative nature, curiosity, seeing what is. What's your reality? Noticing every part of you. I welcome all of you here to this moment. Notice if you are trying to be more, better, different. How much were you having to be that way today? Remembering the practice, it is called a refuge for a reason. It is a safe space for you to arrive just as you are, just as it is, not trying to be more, better, or different. We do enough of more, better, and different during the day. and you make the decision that for less than an hour, give yourself a sense of peace and freedom without the pressure or force of just life's reality during the day. Get present, breathe, settling into this moment between the past and the future. Take another breath in. Let yourself soften. Now come out for a little bit. And open the eyes. Make any adjustments. Maybe if you want to share, type into the chat box just how you're feeling right here now, not 5 minutes ago, but in this moment with this breath, how are you feeling? Just so we can get a hopeful handle on everybody's reality, even with a small group. We're all intersecting at the same time, scattered. Scattered. Okay. So tonight I want to you're going to get a few questions, reflection questions, like always. Um, and it's more just things for you to reflect on, think about, um, weaving it into your practice as you see it's appropriate, as it fits in, as you think about it, right? Because each week we kind of hit on different ideas. In a few weeks, we're going to discuss the topic of karma, and so all of these things ultimately pop up into the mind, into our awareness. The longer we sit. Uh, in one sitting, you'll start to see more things start to pop up. I know I've said that before, but these are helpful things just to remember and to fall back on. Um, just so we weren't worrying about wasting the energy of, I wish I can progress further into my practice, or I wish my practice looked like this. We tend to Our mind, if we aren't careful, tends to judge and become violent in areas where there really doesn't need to be expectations. So, first of all, so talking about expectations, I want to give you a definition that we're going to work off of tonight. The definition is from the Latin word, it's meaning in awaiting. Okay, so not in arriving, we're awaiting something. Expectation, strong belief something will happen or be the case in the future. So basically, it's the blueprints for disappointment. And the key word here is the strong belief. that something should be a certain way. As soon as I have this, as soon as this happens, it should be like this, and then I will gain that. You fill in the blank. But expectations, it's reasonable to have certain expectations. I feel our dreams is kind of what we build our life around, right? We follow those type of instincts, but we also need to be able to check in and recalibrate often, just to make sure our expectations and where our path that we're on is calibrated correctly with the current reality and not what we think the reality should be. Is that making sense? Um, so I want you to think about this. Here's the first reflection question for you. How often does expectation lead to suffering or set us up for suffering? How often does it get in the way? Another way of phrasing it, how often does it get in the way of contentment? Another way I can phrase it is, how often has reality not lived up to your expectations? A monk described expectations as premeditated resentments because expectations can hold us hostage, um, to a future that may or may not happen. And a lot of the times, depending on how much we're craving that future to happen, how much we want something to happen, and we try to force it, we start to apply pressure. Um, we really fight and create some hostility trying to make sure that reality that we're hopeful for ends up happening. And as we do that, it's kind of that process where another branch weaves in now from the tree of meditation, where it's all that craving. We're wanting it to be a specific way, and we're going to do whatever we can to make it just so. And then we have such a strong belief that it should be a certain way. Um, Expectations, we have to be careful in how we handle them because they are there. So, how can we weave them into our practice? How can we work with expectations in a safe way to where it's not harmful and it's not setting us up for disappointment time and time again? Which, of course, again, it's a rinse and repeat. We are hopeful, we think it's going to be a certain way, we have these expectations. We are met ultimately sometimes with disappointment, and then we do it all over again. The cycle continues. And so, how, if we can watch these patterns, we're trying to avoid falling into that pit and falling into that trap, falling into that hole, right? Too often, right? So we minimize how much disappointment that we experience. And a lot of that has to do, we can't just set a goal and then several months go by and you don't check back in and recalibrate, right? Because things change, plans change. We can have a blueprint, but that's not actually how it's exactly going to happen. We may have to improvise, and we do have to improvise always. So many of my clients, so many of my friends right now, my athletes, um, even myself, I'm finding it. I just wish God was sitting on the end of the bed and would just tell me what to do. Just somebody give me the answers just for one day. That'd be lovely. Because recently it's just feeling a little extra challenging to gain some clarity on some things. And so the whole idea is we want to work with reality, with the reality that we have in front of us that's present and in the moment, not work with the reality that we think it should be. We have to be careful about that because that's where you're starting to teeter on that line of delusion. And that's a whole nother night's talk, which will be later in the summer. Um, so what does that look like? Okay, so we check in. So we sit, take a few breaths. We start to shift into the doing throughout our day. Uh, the better, the different, the more, right? Everything that we have to do during the day, we let all of that go because we got to shift gears to be able to see what's going on. Because the first step is to notice the presence of our expectations. And like I said, more times than not, so many of us notice the expectations when we have the sting of disappointment because it didn't happen as we were strongly believed it should be, right? So let's talk about the DMV. That's an easy one. The DMV, we can, or Social Security office, wherever you go to get your birth certificate or anything of those type of forms, paperwork, you can pretty much assess the day that you need. You can plan for the whole day that you're going to be waiting in line, right? Let's say 2.5 hours at the DMV, and go in about 9:30. You're out before lunch. Not bad. That was fine. You had no expectations. You were prepared. You had a very loose, long leash on how long it was going to be. Now imagine having to wait that same amount of time to see your dentist, or I don't know, something that's a much shorter appointment, right? Or your nail place, like if you had an appointment. Um, Different situation, but same amount of time, but how much suffering was involved and frustration was involved in one location versus the other, and the situation and the conditions, right? And so, and that's a very basic explanation. A much more complicated one would be, I feel in parenting, and that first, honestly, in pregnancy, when you're told you need to be developing in this certain way, the number one book that sells and the number one book that I can't stand is What to Expect When You're Expecting. That is the worst book for pregnant women in 2021. Um, Never mind the fact that so much of it's outdated, but I just feel that's a dangerous line to be walking. Um, in your first year of children's development, we're told we need to mark the different physical milestones they hit. We have to say yes, no, and judge it and range it. And you're already thrown into all of that. And also have to remember with the children at 7 and 8 years old, I can't have expectations that they're adults, that they can handle certain information. And that's a constant daily practice of reaching for more patience, reaching for more kindness, more forgiveness for myself, as there's a lot of mistakes. I think that's why grandparents are so good with grandkids, because you kind of have your own life that you mess up pretty good sometimes, and you have your kids' life. You don't mess up so much. A lot of it can be swept under the rug. But then by the time that grandbaby comes around, that's that third life that you kind of get to kind of have a handle on, and it may get just a little bit easier, right? And so, um, I think parenting is a much more complicated example, but it's one to also keep in mind. Um, so here's a quote. Philip Moffat. This is what he said. When you are controlled by your expectations, you are living a contingent life. You can't be free in the present moment. You can't be happy with simple things. Instead, every experience is interpreted in the context of an expected future. That's amazing. Um, and I think isn't that incredible? Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to read it one more time for y'all. When you are controlled by your expectations, you are living a contingent life. You can't be free in the present moment, and you can't be happy with simple things. Instead, every experience is interpreted in the context of an expected future. Okay. So another reflection topic, idea to work with. I want you to reflect on the moments where it has felt like a new chapter, something fresh, a starting line, a new season of life. Nothing but you have that nice, sweet slice moment of nothing but clear blue skies. You have all the answers. This is what is going to shift and change things. So I just want you to think of those moments, that headspace that we've all been in a time or two. Maybe for a moment we think we have it all figured out. Um, our the imagined me going into that imagined future, right? What could go wrong? What could go wrong? Because then we it's maybe not so much expectations, but there's hopes. There may be dreams that you're trying to fulfill, things you got to do, right? Um, but it's important that you pause and you check in on a regular basis, especially when you're on the move, especially when things are happening in life for you. Maybe the current's starting to pick up a little bit, and we all go through those waves. Um, it's important to make sure reality is as it is in your mind and you aren't carried away with expectations, with hopes, with unrealistic expectations. There's realistic and unrealistic, and you need to start to learn the difference between the two. Um, and so it goes, like I said, between wanting the expectations, having it be a certain way, and then finding that dissatisfaction of some kind, and then cycles back to the wanting. So in order to start to see this pattern, right? So this is the pattern I'm talking about. Um, we have to take the time to sit. That's what our practice is. So working with our expectations, weaving it into our practice, taking the time to investigate our beliefs. And remember, it's those strong beliefs of how we think things should be. That's what the expectations are. That's the definition we're working with tonight. Um, as we start to see these beliefs and see our patterns, we can start to play the game of catch and release of we see this, now we have an opportunity of letting that expectation go. And it's not in the sense of tapping out and you're giving up the fight. It's you're letting go of the expectations that's going to minimize suffering, right? So we go inward, we sit for a moment, we check things out, see how things are in there. You notice, do I have any expectations? Do I have any demands that I may need to let go of, that I may be forcing? Is there friction, right? Internal difficulties, the suffering, that's where you're going to start to find these expectations. And those are the ones that you kind of start to excavate first. Um, and what I have found, these questions that I'm about to give you are kind of when I notice that their expectations, me personally right now, I'm still not past the stuff with my small business in the studio a year ago. That's been really heavy on my heart and on my mind and just my nervous system, right? And meditation is really helpful with that to curb that. And so sometimes when I do have to really turn inward and I really got to face the music and see what's up and see what do I keep tripping on? What is my mind tripping on right now? These couple of questions have always been helpful, and I put them on I have them on a card, and I go through this all at least once a week, sometimes once a day, sometimes once an hour. First question, based off of, do I have any expectations? What demands do I have? Where's the internal difficulties, the friction, the suffering? Number one, What belief is sponsoring this suffering? Why am I suffering over this? What belief is there? What's happening? What seed has been planted? And the thing is, kind of when we see it, it starts to fade. You just have to notice it. That's all it is. Notice it, it's gone. But we got to notice it. We got to look at it in the eye. One, what belief is sponsoring this suffering? Number two, is this even worth suffering over? Some things, no, it's not worth suffering over. Things with my children right now, no, it's not worth suffering over. I choose to enjoy their company. I am not going to extend things, especially when it's my expectations that haven't been met. They're just living, right? However, for number two, is this worth suffering about? If you answer yes, there are some things worth suffering about. The studio, the things that my situation right now, it's kind of worth suffering over right now. And if your answer is yes to any situation, then there's information there that you need to investigate. Why is it worth suffering over? What is that belief sponsoring that suffering? What is the pattern? What is your tendency? And investigate in a friendly, curious way, not judgmental, not with expectations on yourself. Is that making sense? When working with expectations, when bringing it into the practice, because the expectations will pop in um, while we're sitting. Like I said, the longer you sit, up to 30 minutes a day, your mind's going to get more chatty. It's going to get louder. You're going to start to notice things. And it's like, where do I even begin? Whatever pops up first. And each week, the whole idea is these are just different tools that you can put in your shed and pull them out. And as it comes up, as it makes sense, maybe this week you focus on the expectations and try to get that practice going. It's more of a practice of inquiry. And then there's a third question. So, number one, what belief is sponsoring the suffering? Number two, is this worth suffering about? And number three, what do I have to let go of to be free? Because the minute you can let go, you feel freedom. But I individually am very much somebody, I have a hard time letting go of certain things. Other things, no problem. So, again, it's a matter of it's not, you can't mess this up. That's the good news. You cannot mess this up. You're not failing one way or the other. You're starting to, um, oh man, girl, because you know what? You notice when you can pull on the threads. I know which threads not to pull on because then the thoughts jump and you go to the same thoughts and you can feel those mental grooves that you have reinforced yet again in the moment because you're catching it. And this is where we have to back up and notice that. And so I do have certain things I try not to think about. And sometimes it's in the middle of the night at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and my mind starts working. And what has helped me the most is giving myself a rope to pull myself out of that hole immediately, especially when I'm in the middle of the night and sleeping. My mind is so free and so not attended to at the time. It can run wild. Um, I immediately have a breathing practice and have a mantra that I do to pull myself out of it and to bring myself back into my sleep, back to my breath, to get out of that as soon as possible because it's almost like an avalanche. There's no stopping it once I slide down in there. Um, and it's within a matter of seconds, even in the broad daylight when I'm walking the dog. And if my mind is idle, and if I let it stay idle and it just randomly drifts off, I have to make sure it stays idle. There's effort in keeping your mind idle. So if anybody can relate to me with me on those things, because I am a particular person, I would like things to be a certain way. Um, yeah, I don't know if anybody can relate, but it's really how I've had to learn to adjust and shift things around, um, as best I can in the moments I can. Because then there's moments that there's nothing you can do about it. It's just a shitty situation, and you just got to get through it. Whatever, metaphorically biting down on a leather strap, whatever that looks like for you, and taming the mind and trying not to suffer. But in the moments that you can reduce the suffering, you want to reduce the suffering so you save the mileage on that internal real estate, that mental real estate, that emotional real estate, and just preservation of the soul, right? And so I want to say, be careful with the mind because the mind can judge you, especially when we sit and breathe. Almost kind of ease up a little bit. Um, we want to get to know each expectation as deeply as possible, um, without judgments, without resistance. Um, because, like I said, expectations bind us. And as much as we learn what binds us, we also learn about the freedom when we release the bondage of it, right? That whole catch and release. Um, and so, again, that's why we want to have a clear sense of what's present in our mind, what's going on in our heart. Um, what am I working with here, right? Um, because when we notice the presence of expectations, we can also notice the absence of expectations. I say that a lot in the yoga class, in the asana class. Um, Release your expectations of me, of yourself, of the practice today. Reflect right now. Would you have been disappointed if we didn't have the class tonight? You know? Um, how do you respond when you are disappointed? That's a whole nother night. And it's sure per situation, the conditions on what the situation is at the time. Um, but our response to the disappointment, um, that's where we dip into that whole conversation of our vices, and what comforts us versus what nourishes us. Um, and so it's this whole battle of expecting versus accepting. Expectations, remember, they hold the experience hostage, and we have to learn to let that go. Let the expectations go. Let the demands go of wanting things to be different than what they are. Um, it's easy to get lost in the how it should be, because when we get lost in that, then we go to battle with what is, because it's not what it should be. And when that happens, we're missing everything that's happening in the moment. When we're wishing it to be something else, we aren't present. You're missing it when you're wanting it to be something different. So the question is, are you more loyal to your expectations? Or are you more loyal to reality? And then I think my final question before we sit is, when does it ever feel like enough? I think, working in therapy, we're doing a lot of inner child work right now, and an exercise that we're doing is the adult me now in this moment talking to little Lexi at 7, 8 years old. Um, and one thing that I've written down that keeps on coming back is things won't get easier, but we will get way stronger. And I want to say that to y'all tonight with the expectations and just the practice. It's like, how many times can you free yourself? How many times can you catch and release? Um, when you find yourself caught, let go, right? It's as simple as that. And there's no right, wrong. You can't do it one way or the other. It's just noticing. And we're probably controlled a lot more by our expectations than we realize. And um, we have these minds that make up these endless stories. Um, and it's your choice how much you want to get caught up in that and what those stories are saying and how much is it actual reality. Um, how much of it are you really being present in here? So, any questions? Does that make sense on expectations? This last year was hard because we didn't know what to expect at all. Every day it was all different. So, um, I think we're getting more to a place where maybe we start to play with real, kind of more active expectations that could possibly flourish into something, maybe. Um, so I just wanted to touch on that as we move into spring, planning, summer, new chapters, seasons. So get yourself comfy, clear your lap. If you're really all about this, let's sit. We're going to go in, kick down the door, one expectation at a time. Position yourself in a way that feels welcoming and awake. Feel yourself settling into this moment of presence, welcoming all of yourself here, no matter what that looks like. Getting present, feeling the tides of the breath. We're landing in this space together, each of us turning inward. Check in. Just in this moment. How are you? What is it like in there right now? How have you dealt with the stuff that doesn't feel good today? Has there been a lot of holding, a lot of doing, reaching? Every breath becoming more still? See if you can start to let go of your demands of needing things to be a certain way, beginning with the body. What are your senses telling you? Are you hot? Are you cold? Is there taste? Do you smell anything? If your eyes are closed, can you sense the light coming through your eyelids Maybe feel your feet on the ground, your legs wrapped up and resting in the body, allowing awareness to fill it up. Softening in places, tension or holding, letting go of what you can right now. Feel the body breathing. How does it know it's breathing from the inside out? As the mind wanders, gently bring it back. An endless cycle of bringing attention back to here, now. Remember, it's perfectly human to avoid the things that are uncomfortable. However, we want to see things clearly so we don't repeat it. A sustained practice develops a different kind of fruit. So feel this space that's safe, a place where you can experience peace and calm and ease just for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever time you are able to set aside, going inward, getting to know yourself more deeply. Looking at each belief, seeing how it may be causing suffering. Just as if we were wanting to teach someone something, we would do it in a friendly environment, a safe place where they can learn without judgment and can open up. Create these same conditions for your practice so you can safely arrive just as you are, just as it is. Choosing for 30 minutes to no longer trade your presence for these hollow ideas of expectations. Letting the moments when you sit, let those moments be where it does feel like enough. Notice how there's less tension, more space between thoughts. Any benefit from us sitting and sharing, we dedicate to all beings in all directions. May you be at ease. May you be free from suffering. May you know peace. Any questions? How are y'all feeling now? Feel free to share. I hope that helped a little bit. Give your mind a chew toy for a little bit, Relaxed. Good. You may notice if you like to journal or write, use this time maybe after these talks if you have space to just be able to extract what's right, what you're experiencing in the moment, and you can go back onto that later. I have found that's been helpful for me personally in my own practice as I start to, again, as you notice patterns and habits and how maybe you can shift things around. Just remember doing it all with the idea of being more of creative, flexible, and not too hell bent on one way or the other. Be careful of gripping too hard. The links will be up. I'm also, oh, good. I can tell you coming up, we're going to be touching on generosity, um, community, um, karma. Those are some of the talks coming up. So I have a whole list and I'm just doing it one week at a time. So we have we have some ways to go. If y'all go to, if you search YouTube, Grown Collective, because this is a donation class, this is a service class. I'm also posting these on the YouTube channel. So you can always go back and hear these, and it's just I can't remember if it's audio or if it's me. Um, but these talks, not the other live stream classes, but these, you can find those on the YouTube as well. If you need something quick and fast, you can find everything that we've done up till now is on there. And I'm going to be working on getting into Insight Timer. It's an app and we can do live stream from there. So the goal is to get that by end of summer instead of Zoom. Okay. Okay, great. We have Wednesday, Friday, Saturday classes this week. And if I don't see you there, hopefully I will see you this time next week. I hope y'all have a good night. Be well.